being live streamed now, and we're going to get kicked off. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Crazed, the podcast about big new ideas in mental health and the amazing people who are making those ideas happen. And we are here for day 2 of our live recording at the COLTT conference, which is being done through the University of Colorado's Anschutz Medical Campus. And COLTT is the Colorado Learning and Teaching Technology. Have a great show. Again, it's a little strange format. The 4 of us are going to be talking and doing the podcast interview. And then there's people watching us, but we can't see them. So we're sort of like fish in a fish tank. And, we have these like creepy peeping Toms looking at us while we're having this conversation. But, at least today, everybody is mindful of the fact that, other people can see us. Yesterday, we had Skip Rizzo on, and he initially showed up without a shirt. And so, we had to make sure that we told our guests, make sure you wear a shirt, which I've never had to actually tell a guest to do that before. So glad you guys are wearing shirts. I'm Matt Vogl, the host. Debbie Boeltz, our co-host. Debbie, how are you today?
Good. Excited for another podcast and another day of the conference.
Same here. Today we're going to be talking, there's, no shortage of podcasts and articles and everything about people looking back at the pandemic and, the impact on young kids, adolescents, young adults. But we want to do something a little bit different now, because obviously things are getting really, really weird again with the pandemic. We've got all the controversy over vaccines and, so much tension and anger over that. We have the surging Delta variant. You have places like Louisiana and Florida that are just completely overrun. The hospitals are full. Even, more cases than they had at, what we had considered the peak of the pandemic last winter. And things are even, worse down in some of those states. So all of a sudden, we thought we were out of the woods and we're not. And so instead of looking back, though, we want to look forward, because we know that this year, in many ways, going into the fall, we've got even more question marks than we did last fall, because it felt like last fall we sort of had a playbook for things. And so we have 2 great guests who are going to help us talk about that. I don't know how to say this without sounding really cheesy, but they're young adults, just in the demographic that we want to talk to today. But they're also interns at the National Mental Health Innovation Center. And so joining us is Alex Smith. And Alex, I'll let you tell a little bit about your background, but you're one of our interns and you're a gamer. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Alex. Hi. I have a really weird background that has led me through a really weird winding road. I'm a certified young person, which is great, but
I'm never going to live that down.
I don't know. I tried to have the traditional college experience and failed horribly at it. So then I took time off and I accidentally became a professional gamer at Magic the Gathering and traveled the world, which was a wonderful experience. And then I got a little bored of it and came back to school, and I really wanted to focus on mental health and understanding how we can improve accessibility. And finding the center was like a perfect little crossroads for where I am in my life right now. I've been playing games my whole life. It's what I grew up on. I learned to read by playing Pokemon, and so I think that's about where I'm at.
That's awesome. Learn to read by playing Pokemon. I want to come back to the gaming thing, because I know when I first heard that you were a gamer, I thought, like esports and, video gaming, but it's not that. So we'll come back to that. But I want to introduce our other intern, Zach Smith, Zach and Alex Smith. There's no relation. And Zach has been with us for over a year now. And Zach is also I think technically you qualify as a social media influencer. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But thanks, Zach. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to be here. I guess I can start with like a little social media influencer. It's not a big deal. I'm not actually one. I just have a TikTok and one thing blew up. That was really it. But anyways,
how many hits do you have on that?
On the biggest video, it was 2 million views, but 100,000 likes or something. It was crazy.
I think that's influencer level. I mean, I don't know what the definition is, but
maybe.
I mean, I was really psyched once when I got 90 likes on something. So,
no,
I mean, I'm not on TikTok because I'm, 52, but, And what were you doing in the video? I guess you should probably tell what you were doing in the video.
Oh, right. Okay. It was definitely a dancing video. I don't remember what song it was. It was from a musical or something. I don't know. It ended up becoming super viral, which was crazy. Anyways, big day for my life. But in relation to mental health, in kind of my background, my family, I guess mental health and like learning about mental health services definitely runs through the veins of all my family, and kind of like psychology as well. So I'm at the University of Washington right now, going into senior year, majoring in psychology, minoring in environmental science. And yeah, I found the NMHIC about a little over a year now. And it's been an incredible experience being able to interact with kind of technology and different applications, as well as kind of those mental health services that can be implemented into them. So yeah, and I'm super excited to go back in person this fall, which is going to be fantastic. Hopefully nothing changes in the moment, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I have a feeling a lot's going to change, but we'll see. You know, hopefully it's relatively normal, whatever that word even means anymore. But Alex, so as you were coming into the summer, how were you? And you were looking ahead, because I think everybody was like, okay, we're going to get through the summer. We did last year. We'll all be outside. It's going to be fine. And everybody was looking to the fall. And when you think back to May or something, what were your expectations for this fall?
It's tough because I think a lot of expectations, but also no expectations at the same time, where like I really rushed to get vaccinated as soon as possible so I could start doing things again. I missed playing Magic. I missed seeing my friends. And my plan for the summer was just to stay online and try to stay safe and like slowly get back into things. And then my plan for the fall was like to try going in person again. And I'm really nervous about going in person, actually, for a huge number of reasons. But I think my expectation going into it was like, oh, I'm going to start having a normal college experience again, and, go back to being like a normal person following the path you're supposed to follow. And the closer we get to it, the more I realized that like that wasn't going to happen anyway, but I think it's like really not going to happen now. And there's like a whole number of things that are just going through my head that I'm really worried about, and I think are getting like are starting to like creep up closer and closer. That were kind of like at the back of my head back in May. Because I was like, oh, everybody's going to get vaccinated, things are going to go open up by August, September, and
Right.
I'm going to get to start traveling again, and I can go back home, I can see my family who all live in Italy, and I can go back to in-person classes. And now I'm like, I don't know when I get to see my family. That's a huge thing I'm really nervous about. Was I was hoping to get to see them by Christmas, and I don't know when I'm going to get to go again. So
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm at.
And is it mostly like the worry, is it around, getting sick, or is it just, worry about, kind of another year, another, season of loss?
I'd say it's about loss, because I know if I get sick, I'm going to be fine. Like, I'm young, I'm healthy, I have a great immune system. I'm way more nervous about getting other people sick. Like, if I get my parents sick, that's horrible. If like I even get strangers sick, I don't know the implications of that. And so a lot of my pandemic experience was just sitting at home, right? And like thinking about all the things I wanted to do that I couldn't do. And I really just don't want to do that again. And like, in a way I won't, right? Because I'm able to do online classes, I'm able to do work at the center. But in another way, it's like I really just want to like hang out with my friends again and go to like a big tournament and be around, and they're like 1,000-person tournaments, and I don't know if we're even going to do them by next year, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, no, I think it'll be 1,003, because already in the chat people are saying, oh, I played Magic, and somebody just said that they downloaded the electronic version on their phone, and so I think you might have some fellow gamers on campus, and when we're all back, you can start something at lunchtime or whatever. Debbie, as a clinical psychologist, it seems to me, just anecdotally, because and I know this will sound stupid because I'm not a clinician, but in the people that I've known that have anxiety, very often it eventually morphs into something else, either into anger because I'm sick of worrying, or depression, or things like that. I mean, is that true? Is that a thing, or is that just something that I noticed in a couple of my friends and I made a wild generalization about?
Probably a little both.
Which I do.
Yeah, probably. No, I think, when I think about this past year and a half, and thinking forward to the future, like there's always been a level of uncertainty, and that level of uncertainty shifts and changes, which obviously causes anxiety. You know, like Alex and Zach, you've been riding this wave of not really knowing what school was going to look like. And it wasn't like, you know, 1 week that you had to wait. It's like been this ongoing process. And so I think whenever we have situations like this, where there's not a clear kind of end point, or, okay, they'll figure this out and then we'll move forward, kind of what you were saying, Alex, about you thought once the vaccine was available, everyone would get vaccinated, everything would move forward. So it doesn't surprise me that all of us experience a lot more anxiety. And especially I think when you're a young person, and you're already in a situation that's anxiety provoking, which is undergrad, it adds to it. And so, but I also think we hold, one thing I keep in mind is we just hold a lot of different emotions. Like there's a sense of loss, there's sadness that comes up, there's, you know, frustration, there's anger. And so I think trying to normalize that as a society, that we, you know, there was kind of this feeling of we're all in this together at the beginning. And I think in some ways, continuing to remember that is a little more challenging. And so, I mean, I don't know if that resonates with you, Zach or Alex, in terms of just feeling like on campus, do you feel, and I realize you're in smaller kind of classes and pods now, but like, do you notice kind of this camaraderie, or this, like, we're in this together, we'll figure it out? Or do you hear that in your classes? What has that been like?
Yeah, definitely in the beginning, when everything was kind of hitting the fan, that was like a big thing, even like with the professors, when people were kind of still going in person, but it was about to be all virtual. There was definitely this sense of, okay, we're all probably about to be completely online, but we're all going to be online like together, and we're still going to have that space to kind of like interact, which was super interesting because like mental health is, I guess historically, there hasn't been like a shared normalized consensus about it. So it's kind of like ironic, this big pandemic, it took like this huge pandemic to kind of bring people together around this sense of like, it's okay to feel these like crazy emotions, I guess. Air quotes for the listeners, you can't see. But yeah, and then I think that kind of like throughout the school year, and just with like friends and family, especially when things were getting like worse and worse, and then obviously now getting hopefully better and better, there's just like, there's been a general sense where like, oh, you've had this reaction to the pandemic too? Oh my gosh, me too. Let's talk about it. Stuff like that. And especially like coming back in person, it just seems like everybody's like more willing and open to share those experiences, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, and I, you know, Zach, you and I are alike in the sense that, you know, we're both pretty extreme extroverts. At least that's my sense of you. And, you know, just really, you know, I've always been, you know, just driven to be around people and to have, you know, people physically around me, and always doing something. And months and months ago, I was explaining to my wife, who's an extreme introvert, you know, I said what this pandemic was like for me. You know, as an introvert, imagine if somebody told you had to go to a party every single night for a year, and how awful and exhausting that would feel if you were an extreme introvert. And I said, that's really what this year was like for me as an extrovert, that, you know, it was that same level of stress and feeling like I was, you know, being denied part of myself. I mean, have you found, you know, like when you think about, you know, if things explode again, Washington, you know, was of course the first big state, you know, when the pandemic hit in the US for the first time, you know, first state where we had a lot of cases, and, you know, you're going back there. I mean, do you feel like, you know, once you're out of the cage that, you know, could you go back to online learning at this point?
I don't know. I think that like it would be really tough if we had like a fall quarter of in person and then things got worse and then we flipped right back. I don't think it would be. I think it would kind of be a feeling of like, oh, okay, like here we go again. I guess it wouldn't be like crazy difficult just because now we're just so normalized to it. And the University of Washington has been really good about like online services with school and whatnot. But it would definitely be a sucky feeling for sure. But yeah, I definitely resonate with like that kind of extrovert feeling. And I don't know, something that came up in my head while you were describing it, but like one of the biggest things for me was just like not being able to like interact with my body while I'm having a conversation with somebody, because like obviously with the screen you can't do that as much. and that kind of like physicality of a conversation. So I'm definitely like, I do a lot of movement when I talk to people, especially in person.
Yeah.
So that was definitely like a big kicker for me. But yeah, like going back to school in person and then flipping back online, that would definitely, I think for a lot of people, it would feel like numbing, I guess. But in kind of a more like, I don't really know, just kind of like a depressing numbing, I think, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I mean, all the fun's gone, I mean, in the early days of the pandemic when people were, banging on pots and pans. And then when everybody was getting, masks for the first time, it was like, oh, that's a cool mask. And, people were like carefully selecting the style of mask they wanted. And now people are just like, just angry about all of it. And, and early on, if you were the one person in the grocery store not wearing a mask, like you stood out and you were the jerk. And now it's almost the other way around. Like if you put on a mask, people are like, dude, you're bringing us back. Like, now we're regressing, and you almost feel apologetic for wearing a mask. Or, what does that mean? Does that mean, that I'm advertising that I'm not vaccinated, or is it just that I'm, trying to be super careful? And so there's actually, I think some of these interior conversations that are happening, when you're making decisions about the mask, but it really feels like just this undercurrent of anger that has sucked like any, not that the pandemic was fun, but we found ways to sort of pull, like you said, to pull together and all that. That's my perception, just like through the news media. But Alex, are you seeing that with other people that around your age?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff you just mentioned like resonates with me really hard, because I was literally like in the grocery store yesterday, and I put on my mask as I walked in, and I realized like nobody else was wearing it. I was like, oh no, do they think I'm not vaccinated? Do they think I'm sick? Do they think like, are they going to hold resentment for me? I need to stop caring so much what other people think. But a lot of what I've noticed is just like, at first it was kind of this new novel experience where people were finding new ways, like learning Zoom and learning FaceTime and learning more tech. And now it's just become this sort of like, people screaming while holding the bars, or it's like, just let me out, right?
Yeah.
I see that with a lot of my friends who are just like, they just want to go places and not have to worry about stuff. And oh shoot. And a lot of my friends aren't, but I see people who are like with disregard. And it's really frustrating, because I'm trying to take this really seriously, and I get really nervous, especially, doing cross country drives, because I couldn't fly back home. And so I, drove 25 hours just to see my mom, who I hadn't seen in a year.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just becoming exhausting. And I think a lot of the common rhetoric around it has just been like, we just want to do things again. And granted, I'm more of an introverted person and I don't get out much, but even to me, it's like, there are some things that I miss that I didn't even think about that I would miss,
Like what?
Just some little things, like obviously like weekly gaming tournaments, just going to like clubs, even like going to the grocery store has become so much weirder. It's
Yeah.
become more of like a get in, get out, or like even just getting delivery, which is frustrating in its own way. But it's just become, I don't know, there's a lot of like small things, like, my partner and I can't do a lot. Like we do a lot of picnics and we do a lot of
Yeah.
walks, but we can't, like, we've never been able to go get like a fancy dinner, right? Or like make a reservation somewhere, because we're both too scared to eat inside. And stuff like, I didn't even think I would miss going to restaurants, right? It's not the kind of experience I like, but I weirdly do.
Well, and I think for a lot of people, it's less about, just going to the restaurant and eating a meal, and more about what it means and what it represents, because of this thing that was denied, and then we can go back, and then the thought of, going back this fall, that, if things start shutting down again, or just going to, delivery only, it's like, right back where we were. And, somebody in the chat just wrote, it's the constant back and forth that creates a mental shift. You get used to one thing, and then you have to adjust, and then you get whiplashed back into another reality. I love that phrase, whiplash back into another reality. I mean, because that's really what I think it feels like for people.
Yeah, I had, like, just you mentioning, Alex, I didn't even think about the takeout piece or the delivery piece, right? Like these things that in a lot of ways we took for granted. Like I got really tired of soggy fries, right? So once we were able to like go out to eat again and be, you know, outdoor eating, I'm similar to you where I don't feel comfortable indoor yet. And be able to eat fries that weren't soggy, it was amazing, you know. But it's this like, I agree with the comment about it being a constant back and forth. And that's the part I think that, you know, as you said earlier, Matt, is triggering a lot of anxiety for people because we just never know what's next week kind of thing. I'm curious, like how you guys are managing like friendships and relationships and all of that. Like, what is that like being a young adult? And like Matt said, your college experience is different because of this, but like, how do you stay connected with folks?
Yeah, definitely. Real quick to the soggy fries, totally agree. That was one of the biggest delivery things where I was like, this is gonna suck. Darn it.
You would think that somebody would figure out the technology to like make fries last, you know, an extra 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, we figured out, you know, we got a vaccine in less than a year, but we still couldn't figure out French fries. And it sucks. We failed as a human race.
The worst part is you're paying like an extra 10, 15 bucks for
Right.
it too. It's so annoying.
The service charge is crazy.
It's absurd.
And I remember like just going back to when Red Robin opened again. Oh my gosh, it was heaven on earth because it was just bottomless. You know, they have all the bottomless stuff. Me and my roommate had like 5 little like trays of French fries that day. Anyways, that just really resonated. Back to your question. Yeah, like the social groups with kind of like this whole process. It's been really interesting because like there's definitely like a huge, at least in my experience, like what you were saying, Matt, like this huge camaraderie, especially in like my social group, where we definitely became very supportive for each other. Like we made these big group chats so we wouldn't lose contact, lose touch. And I've actually this last year, like the last school year, I've been in Seattle in a house with 3 other roommates. So that's definitely helped for sure, just being able to see them every day. But again, it's being able to see them only every day that kind of gets to be a lot, and not being able to like expand that. But we've been lucky enough to kind of like create this big group where we only hang out with each other, which has been super, super helpful. But another thing that kind of came to mind in like these social settings and how like I think it's just kind of interesting that at first there was a lot of camaraderie, but now with all this kind of stuff where it's like, should I be wearing a mask in the grocery store? Should I not? Like, I know that when me and my social group go into some like place, like half of us will be wearing it and half of us won't. And it can create these little like things where I'll look at like my roommate and be like, oh, he's wearing a mask. Maybe I should be. And then it kind of creates this like weird passive energy sometimes. But it's interesting how it's like come at first a camaraderie, but now it's like kind of divided and like, you should be doing this or like you should be doing that. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I that last bit I totally feel where it's like, you know, I'll be walking around and I'll put on my mask and the person I'm walking with like will be like, oh, you don't have to wear that. We're outside, you know, everybody's vaccinated. I'm like, well, you know, in the places where I go, right, Denver and Boulder, most people are. It's, you know, some of the best places in the country, I think. But even still, like, there's that worry. I think my experience just connecting with people is a bit of a unique one because I've never been much of like a get out person. So I still talk to my friends back from North Carolina every day. We get on voice chat and just play games together almost every day. It's been harder recently because we've been busy, but like, I don't know, those are the most connections I foster is just getting on voice calls and just talking to people and playing games with them. I think the most unique experience I had was I met my girlfriend during the pandemic, like almost exactly a year ago now, which has been great. We celebrated our first anniversary. We made a scrapbook, but but we met during the pandemic and we were like, we don't know what to do, right? Like, so we like quarantined for a bit, and then we were both like, I want to meet you in person. You know, we've been calling every day and we have to wait 2 weeks, and then eventually we meet in person, and the only thing we can do is like go to a park and stay like 20 feet away from everybody else and eat really bad homemade sandwiches because I'm not great at making homemade sandwiches. And that was like a lot of
that hard.
I know. It speaks a lot, but like a lot of our early experience was just like we would just go places and just walk. Like we wouldn't go inside anywhere. We wouldn't go to restaurants. We've never even been to the movies together, which is such like a classic experience. And so it's been weird to foster this relationship that has become one of the most important in my life during such a weird time where it's been, you know, such a unique experience. And I think it's given us a lot of space to just like openly and honestly talk more, but we've missed out on a lot of like the classics, right? Like, you know, we haven't been to a big restaurant. We haven't gone to the movies. There's a lot of stuff we haven't done. We haven't gone to a museum, even though I really want to, because I'm a huge nerd. And stuff like that. But I keep focusing on the haven'ts. And I think there's been a lot of space for me to be able to foster really wonderful relationships that I'm really grateful for. But, you know, there's pros and cons to everything.
There's so much blame, I think, you know, like right now that seems to be one of the big undercurrents in society is just, you know, people wanting to blame other people for the state of their own psyche right now. And, you know, people saying I'm miserable because of, you know, however I'm experiencing the pandemic. And so that, you know, there's still this, you know, huge effort to try to, you know, figure out, you know, who can we blame for starting the whole thing, you know, in China, you know, and it's got to be the lab, you know, and I think that part of the reason that people want to identify the lab is just so that they can put a face to it, because, you know, we want to say, oh yeah, that's the bad guy. And you know, and I felt that too, you know, like for me, you know, I'm a public health person. So, you know, in the early days of the pandemic, it was, I mean, it's twisted, but there was almost like a fun element, because I'm like, oh, I get to use my, you know, epidemiology again, you know, and, you know, this is just like, you know, they taught us, you know, it was going to happen. And, you know, going back to the books I had read and everything, and it, you know, everything's felt predictable. And I prided myself on being, you know, like really following all the rules. And then, you know, once I got vaccinated in the spring, I started to feel guilty, because I was like, okay, I got my shot. Now I can get on a plane. Now I can go, you know, to opening day and do some of these things. And, you know, and I look back and wonder, like, you know, was I now part of the problem? Did I, you know, push it too soon? But your demographic, you know, college age students really took the blame for a lot of stuff over a year. Like, you were just always held up. I mean, there was the party at CU Boulder that made, you know, international news about that super spreader event. And people just love to vilify the college students, because you're the ones that weren't taking it seriously, weren't wearing the mask, you're not getting vaccinated, you're not, you know, doing any of those things. Are you still feeling the blame, or, you know, has that become internalized?
You can go ahead, Alex. You can go ahead.
Oh, okay. I a lot of that felt frustrating, because I've taken a lot of steps to be really careful. Like, my parents are both oncologists, so if I got sick, that was nightmare, right? Like, if I somehow got them sick, that was the end of the world. So, you know, I still wear my mask. I drove 2 hours to get vaccinated the first possible day I could, which, you know, was a fun experience to drive down to Colorado Springs. But
That's exactly what I did. Yeah.
yeah,
The King Supers in Colorado Springs.
yeah, I was really lucky because my girlfriend's parents live there, so we made a day out of it. We were like, oh, a surprise. Oh yeah, I also got vaccinated, but surprise. But like, you know, it was frustrating, because I saw, you know, I was really careful. The people I know were really careful. And, you know, especially during spring break, there was this whole, like, you know, all the college kids are ruining all the fun for us, you know, everybody else is ruining the fun for us. And frankly, a lot of people are irresponsible, but I think part of it is you're always going to see the people who are irresponsible during the pandemic. You're not going to see the people who are doing the right things, staying home, wearing masks, being careful, because that's the point. So now I don't feel as much of that, like, you know, it's your fault to my demographic. It feels like it's going away, and it feels like a lot of people are excited for in-person classes to start up, even though there's a lot of stuff I'm nervous about, like how, you know, how well are the vaccine mandates going to be held up? You know, is every student going to have to show their card, which I don't think so. And so that makes me nervous, is like, how much space is there for people to get around that? And I think a lot of people just, from my experience, you know, Zach's experience might be different, is that like people are just looking forward to going back to normal, and that frustration is like, that blame game has sort of shifted, even though it shouldn't be there in the first place, right? You know, it's a disease. You can't see it. There's nothing to blame other than the way biology works, right?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely resonate with a lot of that. I think it was very interesting, like the beginning, because I remember the CU party that happened, and I have like a lot of friends that go to CU, and they were definitely, a lot of them were part of it. So like built up this like interesting like animosity toward like some of my that was crazy toward like some of my friends from high school. But it was super interesting because then I kind of got their perspective, I like from their Snapchat stories, because they were kind of outraged about the news that they were like being like the campus that was blamed. And it was interesting because like on all their like social medias, they were saying kind of stuff like, we will kind of like take this seriously once the school takes this seriously. And there was this like interesting relationship between the students and the staff, the students and like the infrastructure of academia in general, especially for CU. I also remember that at the University of Washington, there was like a frat party that did the same thing, and like 80 people, like 100 people got it the next day. And I remember, yeah, again, feeling like, oh, guys, come on. And just feeling like I was part of that, and I had to bear some of that burden that obviously the other people were kind of like setting, I guess. But it's just interesting that there was still that dynamic that existed between the school and the students, where it kind of felt, to me at least, like a little kid and their parent, when they're like, you're gonna tell me to do something, I'm not gonna do it. Like, you're not doing it, so I'm not gonna do it, kind of thing. So that was definitely the most interesting part. But I totally agree with Alex in that at this point, everybody is definitely looking forward to that in person, but I don't really know what that's going to mean, especially if like this new variant comes out. Well, like it already is out, but like if it gets serious, especially with that kind of stuff, and like partying and like doing all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and because for me, I keep coming back to the, when I was thinking about this episode last night, and sort of like, where am I emotionally right now? I just keep coming back to anger, and I wish that wasn't the case, because it's a terrible thing to carry around, and I struggle with, I'm trying to meditate more now and stuff, just to mitigate that. But like even last night, I'd heard somebody mention that there was all the websites now to help you make fake vaccination cards, and I didn't believe that was true, so I went and looked, and there's like a ton of things where they have like a template, and here's the and they tell you the kind of paper to print it on, and here's what you should write in the thing, and I'm like, for the amount of time that you spend making your fake card, just go get this shot. And again, my it wasn't bewilderment or anything else, I just felt rage, because I just gotten a phone call, that somebody in my kids' carpools, was dropping out because they, the somebody in the family is being compromised, and they didn't want to have, their kid in the car, and so now we're having to figure all this stuff out, and I'm like, and you guys are making, fake cards so that you can go to concerts, and I was like, God, now I'm doing that too. Like, I want the face, I want somebody that I can blame, and I don't know, I don't know how to pull myself out of that sometimes. It's really hard, and it's disorienting because I haven't experienced this before. So Debbie, you're the psychologist, help.
Well, actually, I was going to comment on going back to something you were talking about earlier, Alex and Zach, in terms of how you guys have had to change your social interactions at college. But I think, so someone commented that, this is providing an opportunity to create new experiences. And I think that's kind of the optimist side of my brain, in terms of like, what are the things that, yes, there's a lot of emotions and a lot of anger and frustration, as you guys all know, but the listeners don't. I'm pregnant, and so managing that level of frustration around vaccination, and managing the friends who are going into restaurants and whatnot without masks now, and should I not even be around those people, right? And so there's a whole nother layer to it. But I think like the positive side, I'm wondering if we could just talk about for a moment, in terms of like, what have you noticed in your friendships, in your relationships with your family? Have you noticed any changes where, one, you have created new ways of connecting with them, and two, like, have you felt like any relationships have grown stronger because of this?
Yeah, I wanted to say really quickly about the anger piece, because this is something I thought about a lot when it first started. Was I got really frustrated. I was like, oh, I can't, it felt like I lost my passion because I couldn't travel anymore. I couldn't play games anymore. And because my brain works in a weird way. I think of everything as a big game. And so the way I think about it is it's really easy. Any game you look at, it's really easy to blame external factors. And even if they are contributing, the only thing you have control over are your own actions, right? Anytime you lose a game of Magic, yeah, they may have gotten lucky, but you could have done something different, right? And this is a pandemic, right? We only have so much control. And so to talk about the positives, a lot of my experience has been trying to focus on the positives, and I've kind of used the pandemic as sort of like a crucible to focus on my own mental health, where I was like, okay, I can't play games anymore. I can't, well, like I tried to play online and I hated it. And I realized the biggest thing I loved about traveling was meeting people and talking to people. So I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on becoming healthier. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to work out more. I'm going to drive more, which has been a huge difficulty for me. I'm going to go back to classes. I'm going to like push myself to pursue this passion of understanding mental health and science. And I think out of that, trying to hold like an optimistic outlook on it all, even if it is super frustrating, and I've voiced my frustrations a lot today, and I'm sorry for that, but I think, you know, trying to understand what we do have control over, which changes, you know, it's less than it used to be, and it may never go back to normal, which is frustrating, but understanding, you know, I can control the way I talk to people, I can control the way I'm around people, you know, this is my relationship with my girlfriend is the best relationship I've ever had in my life. You know, I talk to my friends way more than I used to, able to like play games with them every day like we used to back in high school. You know, I've gotten way closer to my dad and able to have these really weird discussions about like universe and esoteric mortality. And so a lot of good has come out for me personally, but when I look at the big picture, it is deeply frustrating. And that's kind of like the weird dichotomy where I'm sitting in, where it's like my life has intrinsically improved over the past year, but I see so many other people's whose hasn't, and that makes me so mad, and that makes me so sad, and like I want to do more to help, but I feel like I have no agency in that area, you know. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and you shouldn't apologize for voicing your frustrations. Like, I think if anything, you represent a voice, you know, that is most likely resonating with a lot of the listeners right now, because we are holding all these emotions. And so it's about how we kind of, how much we get kind of pulled into the different emotions at different points, right? And that, I think, is what you were describing, Matt, of like last night, like those triggers where you're just like, oh man, seriously, like it just makes you feel frustrated. Zach, I don't know if you've had different experiences in terms of just your relationships with friends and kind of family and whatnot too through this experience.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great summation for me too. I think a lot of it, there was definitely, I don't know, I kind of thought of it as like I was trying to stay in a growth mindset for like the past year and a half, and my mom is all about a growth mindset. It's like part of her job. So she would like always be like, exactly, let's do some growth today. I was like, okay, mom, why not? Let's have that perspective this morning, which was fantastic. And I'm generally like a very optimistic person in general. So I think it was very interesting for me, at least, to kind of continue to have that outlook, but at times like struggle with it, which in the past hasn't been as difficult for me to kind of find that like the silver lining for it all, especially when it is so uncertain. But I think like what you were saying, Alex, having those, I had like a lot of moments just to myself, just to be with myself and to understand myself better. I did like weird arts and crafts, like playing with cement, which I feel like I've told that to everybody now. It's always like my new like little tidbit when everybody's like, what'd you do during quarantine? I was like, I made cement pots. Like, why not? And I think it was also interesting because like with like my social groups and my friends, it gave them also that same opportunity, which then gave us an opportunity to like talk about it and be more open with emotion. I think I've definitely gained a lot of deeper insight into my friends, that even like my best friend from Colorado, who I've known for like my whole life, I think I got a deeper sense about like him and his mental health and kind of like the emotions that he usually feels and how it's different for the pandemic, which has been, I think, a super cool experience for sure. Just to be like, yeah, and family members too. Be able to understand them better.
So Alex, you know, developed a great relationship, you know, with his new girlfriend. Debbie learned how to bake bread. Zach made concrete pottery. and I gained 400 pounds. So
I only made bread like
everybody.
3 times. I only made bread like 3 times, but I did
still,
make over 100 candles.
Okay, candles. That was it. Yeah, and I just like ate my feelings for a year is all I did. I think a lot about, the lasting, and this is sort of, Debbie was starting to hit on some of this, but what things that, habits, good and bad, that we developed in the pandemic, with respect to self-care, are likely to be lasting, and what are more like sort of temporary coping mechanisms that will disappear. Because you do see people reverting a lot. Like I was really hopeful that this year would, actually make people permanently change their habits around, personal hygiene. And, and now you see people, and, people are back to not washing their hands again. I was at King Soopers and I saw a woman like lick her fingers to get them wet so that she could open the plastic bag, and then like reach for an avocado. And I'm like, no, don't do it. And it's like, yep, we're back. It's right back to where we were. Like, people didn't learn. But in terms of self-care and the things that you both have described a lot, do you think that those things are going to be permanent, that you've actually made these changes? Or is it just like, hey, once this is done, I'll go right back to where I was?
That's a good question. I think with like, oh man, that is a good question. I think with the creative aspects of it and tapping into more of that, I think that's going to stick for sure. And finding like, again, because those kind of created new outlets for just like interesting little experiences and new hobbies and stuff like that, which definitely expanded at least my kind of outreach of like what I like to do, which was pretty cool. So I think that stuff will stick. But I think there's definitely going to be this kind of thing where it's like, oh, I don't really need to do that distracting stuff anymore since we're coming back in person. I can like kind of go back to the things that the way things were. But I hopefully think that people will stay kind of communicative about their emotions after this. I don't really know if it's going to translate, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I hope that lasts. Alex?
I hope so too. This is actually something I talked with my friends about recently, was just about like what habits have we developed over the past year that we hope to stick. And there are some that for myself that I really hope to stick that have been failing. It's been getting harder to work out regularly and eat out, and eat healthier. But there's also stuff where I think one thing that'll really stick for me is a lot more like health conscious and aware of germs, I guess. Like I've become a little bit more germophobic, which is frustrating, but I know that's going to stick for sure. I wash my hands so much now, and I did before, but it's a lot more now. But I think one of the big things is I feel a lot more comfortable with myself. Being forced to like be by myself and with my own thoughts. There was a big period during the pandemic about 7-8 months ago, so really recent, where I was really anxious, like to the point where it was difficult to do things, and I was and what I was given was a space to be able to get a lot more comfortable with that feeling of anxiety, with that feeling of uncertainty. I think was the big thing that was bothering me, and I pushed myself to, like, instead of my normal habit, which is like distract myself and run away from it, I forced myself to like sit in it and just like feel the things that I feel, which is like the cheesiest thing to say, but that's definitely gonna stick. Like I started meditating, and that's been a huge help for me, and I've been trying to shift myself towards like healthier coping habits, which I think is also going to stick. I've been playing a lot more Sudoku, and I've had a lot of fun with that, which is like the silliest thing, but I enjoy it. And I think the same resonates for a lot of the people I talk to, because I asked them like, what it's been a long time, and what do you think is gonna stick and what's not gonna stick? And a lot of people are cynical about society reopening up and people going back to their old habits. I've seen unbelievably gross people at all the tournaments I go to that has made me super nervous about going back. But I think a lot of my friends, the big thing is like they've gotten more comfortable with themselves. And I don't know how much of that is because we're at the age where we're growing out of caring what people think about us. Or if, that process was just expedited because of the pandemic. But I definitely think that's going to stick.
Yeah. I hope these things stick. I it developed, I've finally, got the discipline to really start meditating regularly. And then this summer I stopped, and now just, in the last, 2 weeks I've started again, because I realized just how important it had become to me. But, you think about, like you guys, weren't, around during 9/11. But I always think about like the 3 days after 9/11, which in many ways I thought were sort of some of the best 3 days of my life. And by that I mean that really people were at their best, that I had ever seen. And so, like, all of a sudden it was okay for men to cry in public. It was, strangers would just, like, put their arms around each other and just cry. And it was like, and that was okay. And there was no pettiness. Like, it was just, yeah, go ahead of me in line. Or, if you cut me off on the highway, like, who cares? Like that stuff had all disappeared. And it was great. And then we went right back to being assholes, after those, 2 or 3 days. And that just made it even harder, because it was like, oh God, you got this glimpse of what it could look like. And I hope that more stuff, maybe, because it was longer this time, or whatever, but I really do hope that a lot of that remains, because it's, not only, my own personal habits, but just, how I feel, or what I see around me, that it was great seeing everybody else, doing better.
Mhm. And I'm curious too, like, Zach and Alex, you've been helping us with a specific project this summer, focused on how teens are leveraging technology, but more on the side of connecting with others, developing how do you show compassion for others through tech and things like that. And, as someone who, I feel like I just need to throw this out there, as someone who started playing Pokemon Go during the pandemic, and it was amazing because I would, like, get out and walk, and it was all because of friends, right? And so there was this piece that I could connect with friends through new technology, and I never, I rarely play games on my phone, but it's been a really cool opportunity where, do you want to, that they can connect with me, and they're on the East Coast, right? And so I'm curious, like, what types of technology are you glad that what are the things you're going to keep using, or things you're going to keep doing around tech? And then I'm going to put you both on the spot to just maybe share some stuff that you've heard from younger folks in terms of the teens, how they've been managing this. Because I think especially for folks who are listening who are parents and have teenagers right now, they've gotten some glimpses into the young adult psyche, but in terms of the teens, kind of what's been going on there too, from just, obviously it's anecdotal because the research is still in progress, but just curious, what types of tech are you going to keep using? And what are teens saying about it?
Yeah. Debbie, would it be weird to, like, add you on Pokemon Go? Because I started playing a
No,
lot.
totally. Yeah, totally fine, Alex. I will say I've been a little more lax at, like, my big thing was, obviously walking around and catching Pokemon. But I move a little slower these days, and it's quite warm out. So I'll just put that caveat out there.
No, that's definitely a habit that's going to stick for me. Was I started walking every day. I would take like a 30-minute, 1-hour walk to play Pokemon Go, and just, like, go down to the library and back. That's definitely something I'm going to keep doing when it gets a little colder out, because, oh my gosh, that's so relaxing. Just throw on a podcast, walk around. But one of the big things that I think we're, like, getting towards, that I really want to emphasize, and I think the biggest change we're going to see is through young people when they start getting older. Because a lot of these people, especially the people that we've been talking to, are going through these huge critical growth periods during a pandemic. And when they get older, they're going to remember it. They're going to remember it super vividly, because it's shaped, like, part of their experience, like some of the most crucial experience of their life. And so I think we're really going to see the change, 10, 20, 30 years from now, when people who are like 8 years old during the pandemic and all they knew was everything shut down and you had to start caring about a lot more stuff really quickly. Maybe they'll be more adaptable. Maybe they'll be more health conscious. Maybe we can make a lot of guesses, but to talk about the specific tech is I use a lot of tech. I'm a very tech oriented person. It's, I'm a huge nerd, like I've said, and I want to say thank you to Danielle in the chat for shouting out nerds. But I think a lot of the big thing is I've been more connected with people, and I've been able to play more social games, I guess, because a lot of what I used to do was just, I'd find a really like 200 hour long game, sit in my room and just play through it. But now it's like, I can play this, MMO that I've never liked MMOs before, and now I've got really into it because all my friends and I play, and it's become this weird social experience that's really enjoyable. Um, I think that's going to stick. I play my Switch a lot more. I use my phone a lot more. Um, I've always been connected to this stuff, but I seen other people become more connected with this stuff has made it a lot easier for me to foster these really powerful social relationships. And I think for some people that is going to stick, and that's something I'm really grateful for. Is some of the best conversations I've had in my entire life have just been text messages, or over Discord, and it's something I'm really grateful for, that I'm able to have that experience, and that people are coming into it, and a lot more people are playing on Steam and on whatever gaming platform they like. And I don't know, it's been really nice to be able to like nerd out with people more than I used to, and I hope that sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like for me personally, I definitely resonate with a lot of that. One of the, probably like the two biggest things is FaceTime, just because like that was huge, and like not just texting everybody every day instead of like seeing their faces, and like I don't know, I just like love it when you can like like you see their movements, like they're walking around in their kitchen, but like you're watching them do it while you're talking. It just makes it
Mhm.
feel like much more in person. And then also like YouTube. A lot of like in-person podcasts, not in person, like podcasts with different like YouTube, um, like streamers and whatnot kind of came out during the pandemic, and kind of just being able to watch those people interact kind of made it feel like you were too. So I think that that was definitely another piece of technology that I used. And then in relation to the kind of like that, this question about like how adolescents are kind of managing and going through it. From the participants that I've kind of interviewed, I've definitely gotten the sense that high school sounded way worse than the college online. That's at least from me. I don't know, Alex, if you've kind of like felt the same way. Yeah, but it seems like the high schools definitely were unable to manage it as well as, at least for me, like the University of Washington. So I think that coping with that and feeling completely like out of touch with the school and like what you're supposed to be doing, what your schedule is, and who you're like going into to see to class if you are going to see them. And I've gotten like a ton of variety of answers from that. There isn't like one method that all high schools are using. It's very, very like spaced out and varied, which has been kind of interesting to hear. And also, I think that another big piece of it is the relationship these adolescents kind of have with their parents. I think there's been a really big growth stage with it, and like communication has kind of like had to be made, especially when these adolescents are kind of going through these crazy school changes and they don't really know how to manage it. And maybe at first their parents aren't as aware of it because they're out of touch with technology. But in these conversations, it always sounds like throughout like the pandemic, there's been like this, again, this camaraderie to communicate about that. Like that child parent slash caregiver relationship has definitely, I feel like it's definitely gotten deeper and more impactful from the people I've interviewed. I don't know about you too, Alex.
Yeah, I sorry for butting in again, but I definitely feel the same. The biggest takeaways that I've had from the interviews that I've done, one of them is that the high schools have been floundering, and that's been a really universal experience. But the other thing is like, one is a lot of people have talked about social media, and being able to connect with people and communicate easier has been one of, if not the biggest thing that I've heard from multiple people. The other is that all these really young people that I've been interviewing have seemed so mature, and so like they've spent this whole year pondering life's meaning, and
Yeah.
they're like, I know what I'm gonna do in college and for my career. And I'm like, you're way too young. I'm too young to have this stuff figured out. And it feels like a lot of these people, a lot of these really young people have had so much pressure on them that they've like, a lot have adapted to, but some haven't. And it's been this really weird experience where it feels like a lot of these kids have been forced to grow up really fast.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously nobody said that, but it's just something I've noticed, is that like they're talking about stuff that they're way too young to like even be worried about, with like life trajectory, and like just do well in school, right? And so the biggest thing is people have been talking a lot more, especially online and through technology, and that's been huge. And that's the biggest trend that I've seen, is just everybody's been more interconnected. while not being in person.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed something that I've experienced with my own 11-year-old. And I can't believe some of the conversations that we've had over the, when I was 11, I never asked my parents, like, what happens if the grocery store runs out of food? Like a lot of kids were asking in the early days of the pandemic. But I didn't ask them ever about like, well, wait, what if you die and mom dies, and you both get COVID, and then what happens to me? And so I was super sad about it early on. But now looking at him and I'm like, God, he developed superpowers, like, a resilience that I never could have dreamed of at 11. It was it was so sad to see it early on, but now to see kind of what it's and God, kids are going to need it, because the world that we're leaving them, with climate change and just the state of things politically and everything. I mean, there's they're going to need the skills that they got this year in a big way.
Yeah, I think the fact though too, Matt, and you mentioned this in terms of the Alex and Zach, in terms of the interviews, is like, because of the quarantine, parents and kids were spending a lot more time together too, and so I think kids had an opportunity to kind of explore these conversations more and talk more to their parents. And so I'm hopeful that moving forward, that piece will be one of those things that people continue to do, making more time to just sit down and talk. Because a lot of times, I can imagine, right now I just have to manage a dog, but like I can imagine that a lot of, running around to different sporting events, running around to different activities, different, social events, all of these things kind of ate up a lot of time. And so parents and kids didn't even have that time to kind of connect. And so I wonder if in some ways just being able to open up those conversations was easier, because everyone was in the same household for extended periods of time too. So I'm hopeful that families will continue to hold on to pieces of that as we start, doing more things outside again, is kind of my thought.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm just gonna say it, and Debbie and you and I talked about this a little bit. I'm gonna miss Zoom. I've gotten totally used to Zoom because because you can like send text messages during it to somebody else in the meeting and be like, oh, that person's lying, or whatever. You can make little jokes, and it's like, God, how are we gonna do that face to face? Because you really get used to doing it that way, to have those little side conversations that nobody knows you're having. And I'm gonna miss that. I get it. And the other weird thing I noticed when we started having our staff meetings together is eye contact totally throws me now, because on Zoom there's sort of eye contact but not really. And then when we had our first staff meeting together and people are like looking, and they're looking right into your eyes, you're like, what are you looking at? Like, stop, you're making me uncomfortable. It's just weird. And that's going to take some adjustment, I think, when we go back in November.
Oh my God, absolutely. Oh, sorry, Alex, you go ahead.
No. I've been stepping on your toes all day. You go.
I was just gonna say that I literally think about the eye contact thing all the time. I made like a DJ name for myself, and it was like DJ eye contact sucks or something like that. And I was gonna, in my head, I was gonna open every like DJ podcast or whatever. It's like, how's it going, everyone? You guys are tuned in to DJ eye contact sucks. And guess what? Eye contact kind of sucks. And that was like gonna be my whole bit. But another thing is just like my mouth movement. Like wearing a mask, I can have my mouth like open while I'm walking around, or like doing whatever it needs to be doing. But then when I take it off, I feel like I'm so much more aware, like what my lips are doing when I'm like walking past somebody. And I'm like, is this what I usually do? Like, is this how usually my face looks when I walk past? And I'll be like, and then the next person I'll be like switching it up. I guess to the listeners, I'm just doing different like facial expressions. But yeah, that's definitely been a weird character. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm so worried about having to like put on pants every day instead of just rolling out of bed in my PJs and showing up to every meeting, which has been phenomenal. And also commuting, I'm really worried about that. That's going to be so hard.
Yeah, it is. Well, we've just got a couple of minutes left, and one of the first questions that was asked in the chat, Zach, was how can people find your video on TikTok? I can't answer that question because I'm not on TikTok, because I'm, my kids won't let me. So how can people find it?
Okay, I can put in my username. It's not on my account, it's on my friend's account, but you can like go through my username and find it through what I've been tagged. Oh my gosh, sorry. Whoa. I'm trying to look at what it is. I'll just put it, if I put it in the chat, does it like show up everywhere?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll put it in the chat. You guys can meander it all you would like. But if you look at like where I'm tagged in, then it should pop up, I think. So here it is. Wait, Smith, Zach, 7.
All right. So people who are listening to the podcast, it's at Smith Zach ZACH 7, and you can find his dancing video with 2 million hits. You guys, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for just sharing your experiences. And I was trying to like at the beginning kind of falling all over myself, trying to not make this feel like condescending or anything, like, oh, you young people, and I just blew it. But it's so illuminating, and I really I personally have learned a lot, just about resilience, and just the way you've turned some of the negative stuff into positives, and I'm really carrying a lot away from this. So thank you so much. And Debbie, as always, thanks for being such a great co-host, and we're going to miss you when you're on maternity leave. So yeah, thanks for joining us for this episode of Crazed, and thanks to everybody at the COLTT meeting for